There's something a bit sinister lurking beneath Attack on Titan. Personally, I've never had a more visceral, physical reaction to any television series than this one. I think what brought out my panicked response was what's going on under the surface. Just so I can sleep at night, I'm gonna dive into what that might be, using the first season as an anchor point. With Season 4 just premiering and all, don't worry, there are no spoilers for 4, 3, or even 2. Although the principles that I'm covering are more applicable now in Season 4 than ever, so stick around. Attack on Titan, with Eren as our guide, is a grisly reminder that walls are not a gift, they're an exchange. And what we exchange for those walls comes with a hefty price tag. In Season 1, we meet a caged, repressed boy. Repression is forced physical and psychological restraint, denying the very natural forces of a particular need or desire. And I don't have to tell you, Eren's been subdued and restrained by the walls he lives in. The adults around him have lost their spark and settled for less, while every facet of his being knows he's not supposed to be living like he is. Like the father of psychoanalysis says, unexpressed emotions will never die. They are buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways. There are, then, consequences for someone like Eren. The consequences of repression are largely what Attack on Titan illustrates for us. Human beings can't help but experience a subconscious aggravation when the world around them demands repression in the name of maturity and adulthood. Eren elucidates this best when he says,
"So what? It's more grown up to settle for living in fear behind some stupid wall your whole pointless life? Eren!"
This mirrors exactly what Freud, again, said. People have exchanged some part of their chances of happiness for a measure of security. Attack on Titan then begs the question, is this exchange equal? I think we know the creator Hajime Isayama's stance. Listen to this translation of the first opening theme. Livestock complacency? False prosperity? Give us the freedom of dying, starving wolves. The humiliation of being caged is what triggers us to fight back. In this sense, fighting has nothing to do with ODM gear and scouting missions. It's talking of the unspoken battle. Natural desires versus our roles as members of a functioning society. Primal instincts versus the masks that we wear. And Eren is not exempt. Like Hannes says, Eren
tends to dream bigger than life really wants him to.
And this is what makes Eren our protagonist, because on some level, we all feel the same way about our own lives, our own proverbial walls. I think we can safely come to the conclusion then that Eren is not a kid living in a fictitious, dystopian, pseudo-Germanic world. Eren, by all means, is the repressed, pissed-off constituent of every single one of us that knows somewhere deep down we got played. We've been duped by our walls, by civilization. Eren's a symbol of repression, a faculty of the psyche so many people struggle to identify. Our walls don't have to be Maria, Sina, and Rose. They're our own culture. They're the people who are supposed to love and protect us, but failed. I think Chuck Palahniuk says it best in Fight Club, as we realize our environment isn't as nurturing as it promotes itself to be. We're slowly learning that fact, and we're very, very pissed off. And no different than how Paradis initially responds to Eren's Titan shifter, culture says that this can't be true. We can't have a dark side, an aggressive facet of our personalities. Isayama, through 4 seasons of storytelling, flips them the bird and says that we do. Attack on Titan's primary theme, if we're to give it one, is civilization versus nature, our walls versus what exists outside of them. A battle we all face every single day, our spirit and our muted surroundings. At the end of the day, you and I, just like Eren, are primates. The British historian William Winwood Reid says, "Men prefer to believe that they are degenerated angels rather than elevated apes." Yet, apes we are, just like Eren. And this sentiment is really hit home in Season 2 when we're introduced to a new character, I'm not going to talk about it to avoid spoilers, but people caught up know what I'm talking about. Regardless, the American neuroscientist Paul MacLeod concluded that humans have a compartment of the brain which is referred to as the reptile brain. It drives aggression, dominance, and territoriality. And do you think civilization, root word there being civil, accepts that element of man? It can't.
My conscience will not falter to watch you die!
Nor should it.
Civilization, paradise, condemns that part of our personalities. Like German psychologist Erich Fromm explains the Freudian perspective. Aggression comes from the frustration of man's instinctual desires, imposed upon him by civilization. And is this not exactly the idea that Isayama builds for us with Eren? And I understand this is a pretty big claim I'm making, so I'd like to mention I'm not just pulling out of thin air here. Isayama himself said that Attack on Titan was ultimately an exploration of, quote, how tragedy can drive people to aggression. And the tragedy of civilization, that double-edged blade of safety, is one hell of a predicament for people. Just a quick aside because we're on the reptile brain. I think it's important to point out the part of our brain which is referred to as reptile is the area of the brainstem, which runs down the back of our neck and into the spinal cord. I don't think it's a coincidence that's right where a Titan has to be struck to be conquered. Their life force, their entire capacity of being, is animal, reptile. Eradicate it, and they become nothing. So what happens when the people of Paradis are forced behind walls? What happens when you expect livestock complacency from a primate with the brainstem of a reptile? Granted, Isayama says that the arrangement works to a point. Here you are, likely in a house or apartment, watching a YouTube video, instead of being out right now, scavenging for berries and ants. This deal can ultimately be looked at as a positive thing. I mean, no one on Paradis would have survived without the walls, but as Attack on Titan reminds us, civilization is not a gift, it's an exchange. Armin is the one to hit this home, saying,
It's sad. What most people here are willing to settle for in exchange for some fleeting sense of security.
And of course, as with any exchange, we lose something in the trade-off. So what is it that we settle? What part of us do we have to repress in order to live within Paradis? What is it that we stow away in the basement? There's an inherited darkness in all of us. John Carpenter called it Michael Myers, Judeo-Christians called it original sin, and Sigmund Freud called it the id. Humans are not just capable of, but have the drive to feel, think, and execute truly monstrous things. But as it turns out, this capacity is essential to the psyche as the heart is to the body. Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung said, "How can I be substantial if I do not cast a shadow? I must have a dark side also if I am to be whole." And so to entirely stow away our darkness, to reject it, is effectively suicide. To lock it away in the basement, shielding society from the truth that we carry, is self-murder. And that is our trade-off. By living in society, by living in Paradis, we've agreed to suppress any evidence of this darkness in order to keep the walls from crumbling. But what are the consequences of this on the individual, on someone like Eren? Because, like Jung once more said, the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. Does a functioning civilization have room for this darkness? Does Paradis welcome Titans? Definitely not. But therein lies the catch-22 of civilization. We have no choice but to make room for our darker faculties, because they need to manifest in one way or another. Eren is someone who, through the preceding actions of his father, approached the part of him that culture says to avoid, the part that your priest or your teacher told you isn't allowed to take shape. Instead of cowering behind the walls of his own ego, Eren slowly learns how to walk alongside his own aggressions and spites through pain, which literally become his rebirth. This is no different than it would be for any individual in the real world to develop a functional relationship with their own Titan. Isayama explains this contradictory deal, saying, "The world is merciless, and it's also very beautiful. It's both at once, just as we are both human and Titan." And that's the catch, the poetic kind of denouement. The Titans beyond the walls and the cowering people inside of them are the same things. They're two sides of the same coin. Eren and the smiling Titan, they're the same character. The human part of us and the animal part of us. Our duality, our conscious self and the unconscious components that direct our lives from beyond the walls. We can subscribe to this trade-off for a long time, but eventually, the walls will fall, and there will be nowhere to hide. So what happens to a creature stuck in this predicament? What happens to Eren, a machine with a drive for freedom stuck behind civilization in half-functional form? Does this machine adapt? Well, as best it can. But a fully functional human experience inside of civilization is quite frankly impossible. As Erich Fromm concluded, saying, "Modern civilization fails to satisfy profound needs in man." So, clearly, a primate is still a primate. Eren is still repressed. And no matter what kind of cage you put a primate in, no matter how rewarding the prison bars, there will always be an unconscious force trying to tear them apart. So, what's the point here? Is Isayama just dismissively nihilistic? Is his claim that civilization is just an inescapable tragedy? I don't think so. Like we discussed earlier, civilization is an opportunity to be a bit more than animal. Our ancestors needed walls to develop the arts, relationships above that of using and abusive. Had there been no civilization to any degree, Titans would have ravaged and consumed until there was no life left. Isayama approaches the walls as this aforementioned double-edged sword. So what is Isayama's answer, if he provides one? I think Attack on Titan proposes an answer through the Titan shifters, those capable of approaching darkness. This process, for anyone, not just fictional characters, begins with first understanding that everyone carries a Titan, or at least the capacity for one. It starts with understanding that this isn't inherently evil, that darkness doesn't have to be blasted to smithereens with a cannon. There's a Titan within your teacher, your mother, and your father, in the person you love, in the rabbi at your synagogue, in the priest at your church. And just because our civilization has erected walls to keep those Titans from wreaking havoc, doesn't mean those shadows don't have substantial influence on our behavior, and our feelings, and our perspectives on one another. Attack on Titan's point, then, if we are to squeeze it into a single sentiment, is develop a relationship with them. Approach them. Unlock the basement door and learn of them. Isayama makes this abundantly clear as he shows us what productivity can come from utilizing the nature of a Titan instead of destroying it. Our walls make us violent, not just because it's in our nature to be violent, but because repressing nature develops violence. Civilization then effectively launches an attack on Titan. And it doesn't go that well. So in order for Eren to live within Paradis, he had to betray a part of civilization and simultaneously betray a part of himself. It's a tricky balancing act, a fight we face every single day, but if properly tended to, leads only to freedom. That is going to bring us to the end of conversation, but I have a couple more videos coming out. I have a lot of videos coming out, and I'm just starting out. I'm trying to get my footing with this, so subscribe. I'd really, really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
I pee-peed a little bit.